Welcome, 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 welcome. Welcome everybody who is currently live with me, and welcome everybody who is watching the replay. Today I have a super exciting topic for you, and that is boundaries. I think boundaries are important for everybody. Boundaries are important in every relationship. I used to think that I would only need boundaries for certain people or certain situations, but I've come to learn that actually boundaries are important for every relationship in your life. But let me introduce myself. My name is Melanie Josephine. I'm so excited to be live with you here on my YouTube channel. If you haven't subscribed, please do so. It's free, and I'm doing a live stream every Monday night at 7 p.m. And if you have any topics that you would like me to bring on the live stream, then please write that in the chat or write that in the comments, or you can come and follow me on Instagram. My name is melanie.josephine, and I always announce on Monday mornings what sort of topic I have for the next no, not for the next week, for the evening, for tonight. Basically, I announced it this morning. So yeah. Also, I wanted to say thank you for all the lovely feedback on the last live stream. The comparison live stream really blew off. So many people watched it. If you haven't watched it after this, I'm really happy that you're all coming onto the live stream and that you're enjoying it so much. And yes, grab a cup of tea, grab a cup of coffee if you're not watching live, because I think it's too late to have a coffee. But just come and chill with me, and we're going to talk about boundaries today. So I'm about to start, but just wanted to let you know, whenever you have a question about this topic, or if you already have a question about this topic, please write it in the chat. And yeah, so let's start. I want to start with a definition. So I looked up a couple of definitions when it comes to boundaries. And the first one that came up was personal boundaries are guidelines, rules, or limits that a person creates to identify reasonable, safe, and permissible ways for other people to behave towards them, and how they will respond when somebody passes those limits. I do believe that most people would probably describe boundaries exactly as I've just read it to you. But as you follow this live stream, I'm going to give you a little bit of a different perspective on boundaries, which will empower you. So stay tuned. Another phrase about boundaries that I've written down is boundaries are an expression of love for yourself or for ourselves. I think this is a really powerful one. And then boundaries will solve any resentment you have toward anyone in your life. I think this is really interesting, because I guess it's easier said than done. If you are truly capable to sit back, think about a situation. Let's just bring up a situation because it's easier if we have an example. I've actually done a video on this. Let's say your boyfriend is always late and you want to set a boundary around that. So you could tell him that the next time he's 15 minutes late and he doesn't tell you why, or he doesn't call you, or just genuinely if he surpasses the 15-minute limit, that then you're just simply going to leave. That will be a boundary. So this sentence says boundaries will solve any resentment you have towards that person. So if you set that boundary and you tell the person, by the way, you don't always have to tell the person. You could also just decide that you have that boundary. But there will be situations where you'll decide it will be better to tell the person, and there will be situations where it's not necessary. We're going to talk about this a little bit later. But I wanted to tell you that this anger or this resentment is only coming up for you if your boyfriend's late and then you follow your boundary, after 15 minutes you leave and you're angry then. And that in that case, that statement would not be true, that boundaries actually solve this issue. But how can the boundary actually solve this issue? And one of the coaches that I was listening to this week, it was so amazing. So many people said things about boundaries this week, and I was like, oh my gosh, it's totally meant to be, because I'm doing this live stream about boundaries. And what she said was that don't set a boundary before you're actually willing to accept the person as they are. So somebody might always be late, or somebody might always, I don't know, do something, just simply do something that annoys you, or that bothers you in any way, shape, or form. But you already know this about this person. Otherwise, you wouldn't even want to set a boundary. But if you really want the boundary to resolve things, you need to be really clear on why it's so important to you to have that boundary. So you need to actually think about, is it really necessary for me to have this boundary? Why is this so important to me? And if at the end of that conversation with yourself, you realize, yes, this is very important to me, then you can take the next step. You can tell the person. And then when it comes to a situation like this, rather than getting angry if they do behave the way that you kind of already know, you should expect it. Just expect that this is something that may or may not happen, and that if it does happen and you do follow through on your boundary, that you will not fall into your old habit of anger. This might need a little bit of practice, but this is basically where this resolution is coming from. If you do fully accept who the person is, and you decide that you want this person in your life, even though they have these flaws that maybe sometimes drive you up the wall, then you need to be willing to see the boundary through and not get angry about it, because otherwise you're always going to be in this cycle where you're going to be angry. But if you decide, I want this person in my life, and I can expect that this might sometimes happen, but I won't be angry. I mean, there's different kind of backup plans that you can have. If it's, for example, a friend, and let's say she always shows up late. Obviously, there's other examples as well, but let's just stick to this one. You can make the decision that you won't meet up with this friend as often as with other friends, or you could make the decision, if this really happens all of the time, or like several times in a row, that maybe you don't want to meet up with this friend anymore. This kind of comes down to the next point I want to talk about, and I wasn't really sure if this is a necessary thing until I did the research about boundaries. And that is, if you're setting a boundary, you must be willing to potentially lose that person if they keep violating your boundary. Why am I saying this? I'm saying this because, and I think deep down you already know this, if somebody is constantly violating your boundaries, they are not really respecting you. They are not valuing you the way that hopefully you would want to be valued. And the flip side on it is also, if you stick around even though they don't show you that respect, then that means you're actually not showing that respect to yourself, which is even worse. So then you're not going to be happy with them and yourself. You're going to be just unhappy with the entire situation, because you know that you're in control of your life. You're not in control of anybody else's life. So this is really what I want to bring across in this live stream, which is a little bit different to the first definitions that I read to you in the beginning, because the first definition kind of leads you to believe that when you set a boundary, you're just telling a person how to behave, which is basically like a little protocol, a little manual that you have for that person. But if they don't stick to that protocol, then in your world there may be something like, quote unquote, a bad person. But the truth is, the only person that you control in your life is you. I also really love the quote that the only person that can change your life is you, because it's really true. Only you can change the way you look at things. Only you can change the way you actually react in situations. And you also have the power to say, actually, I've had enough of this. I don't want somebody in my life who behaves like this. That is completely fine too. But just be aware that, yeah, that you are the person who is in charge of your life. And if you set a boundary, the other person violates it, and you just continuously stick around and you don't see through what you've said you would do, then you lose that person's respect and you lose your own respect, and you are not treating yourself with respect, value, worthiness, all that. That actually leads to into the next point that I would like to talk about. If you have a really good level of self-love and you really value yourself and you nourish that relationship, that means you do things for yourself, you do show yourself your self-love and your self-respect, it will generally be easier to follow through on your boundaries because you have that positive relationship with yourself and you don't want to lose that. And also comes down to self-trust, because when you say, I don't want you to do X, Y, and Z. If you do that, then I will leave the room, I'll leave after a certain amount of time, or I will, yeah, just whatever you decide is the right thing for you to do. And you do it when the moment comes, then you show yourself that you can actually trust yourself. You do as you say you would. But if you don't have that self-trust, if you say things but you don't follow through, then it just goes into this whole negative cycle. So if, let's say, you're not ready to set a boundary with somebody, it could be a good first step to actually start that I am enough work, the self-worth work. There's like meditations that you can do. You should actually watch I did the live stream on self-love, self-confidence, and self-trust. You should watch that live stream because I give a lot of advice on what you can do to, yeah, drive your self-love up. Because when you're already at a really good level of the relationship within yourself, then setting boundaries will become easier. But if that relationship with yourself is not in a good state, then setting boundaries will be harder. Let me quickly go through my notes. Yeah, so I wrote down a boundary needs to be set with love and followed through, which is basically what I've just been talking about. It's not so much that you go to the person and you're like, it's so annoying that you're doing this and this and this. This is actually the next point I really, really wanted to mention. Very, very important. And I've only realized this when I've done the research for this live stream, actually. But very, very valid point is that when you are really honest with yourself and other people, in most times of your life, I don't know if anybody can do it all of the time, but in most times in your life, you will not need to set so many boundaries because you've been so honest with people. People know you so well that they would rarely even cross one of your boundaries because they already know that you don't like certain things. Or it also comes down to an issue that most of us truly have, is with people pleasing. We want the other person to be happy, not just our partner, like also friends or family members, or people at work. We want to have that peace. We want other people to like us. And when we people please, we often do that at our own expense. And sometimes we only notice later on in the day that we've maybe said yes to something that we should have said no to. And if that happens to you, if you say yes to something and you, like, down the line, maybe at the end of the day, maybe a few days later, you realize, you know what, I should have said no, then there's two things you can do. You can actually change your mind because you're allowed to. I recently watched an interview with Oprah, and I thought it was so interesting when she said, yeah, one day I realized, you know what, I'm allowed to change my mind. I can just change my mind. But there may be some situations where you don't want to do that. Maybe you're already very close to a deadline, or you've set you would do a favor to a friend and it's already tomorrow and you don't want to let them down. I completely understand, but you can learn from your own behavior. So if you notice, oh, I should have actually said no, it's a bit late now, I want to live up to my word, I'll do it. But next time, if I'm in a situation like this, actually, I should say no. And I will say no. Say that to yourself, because your brain's going to remember. Don't just say I should. Say to your brain, next time in a situation like this, I am going to say no. Another example that I heard, I think it was in The Power of Vulnerability with Brené Brown, when she said, this lady approaches her and says, would you bake a dozen, I don't know, cookies or brownies or whatever for the school sale or something? And she says, you know what, actually, no, I just can't. I'm sorry. If there's anything else I can do, or next time, I'd be so happy to help. That you don't have to say these things from a negative standpoint. You don't have to say no in an angry way or in an upset way. You can actually say no in a loving way. And if you do that, if the other person reacts in an angry or in an upset way, you know, the other person is allowed to have these feelings. Give the other person the space to have these feelings, but don't make yourself accountable for these feelings, because that's what we very often do. And I'm not saying that that is so easy. It is definitely a practice. And I wouldn't even say that I'm a master of this, but I have learned and I have understood now that this thing that people say, oh, I don't want to say this to hurt somebody, in the end of the day, only what that person thinks of what you said or did will ultimately hurt them, not actually the words that you said. And especially if you've come from a really, really loving angle and you've explained why you why you can't do that. Although in some situations you may not want to explain, because when I did my research, I came across somebody who said, you know, sometimes if you explain yourself, someone who really wants to take advantage of you or really wants you to do what they want will use that in their advantage. And I thought, oh, okay, I guess you have to weigh out who you're talking to in this situation. So sometimes I will definitely explain, because I like when somebody explains to me. And the people that I love in my surroundings, I want them to know why I don't want to do something, but I do also want them to respect when I say no. However, there may be some people that you're not so close to, or that you just know they just never take no for an answer. And with those people, you just want to say no without an explanation, and here's why. So, if with those people you say no and you give them an explanation, it's it could easily happen that, let's say, you say, I don't want to come, I don't know, I don't want to go to this party because I'm tired. Then that person might say, oh, but that's not a big deal. I mean, you can't be that tired. You should definitely come anyway. Or, I can't do this because I need to pick up my kids from school or whatever. And then they say, oh, I'll arrange somebody else to pick up your kids, and you can definitely do this and this. You really have to then be very clear that it's not about what the other person is going to arrange for you. It does come down to your no, and that you are very certain in your no. And yeah, you can be super loving with that. You do not have to come from anger or resentment. And this is another valid point that I came across in my research, is that when you live that way, when you live from your heart, when you live from through being honest all the time or most of the time, then you will rarely come into the situation that you have to, quote unquote, stand up for yourself. Because standing up for yourself really usually results from you not being honest for a really, really long time. And then suddenly you feel like, all right, now's the time. I need to stand up for myself. I need to give all the reasons why. And that is usually not even necessary if you can make it a practice in your life to be honest with people. And even though I think most people would probably say that they're honest, I don't think that. I think there's for a lot of people, there is still a lot of room for more honesty, for more vulnerability. But when I say for more vulnerability, I don't mean oversharing. I also mean, take good care of yourself. Only share with somebody you truly trust, and just be reasonable, I guess. Let's see what else. Because I have quite a few more notes. Let's see. I already said this. Trusting yourself is the key to seeing your boundaries through. Here are a couple of questions that I wrote down that you might want to ask yourself if you are not sure. So if somebody asks you something, also very good tip for the moment, like for in the moment, if you are not sure whether you want to say yes or no, you can always say, look, I need to check my calendar, or I'll get back to you. And that's a good way. But that being said, please then also do get back to them, or and let them know, because it happens to, I think, a lot of us, because we don't enjoy saying no. When we do say we're not sure, we then often don't get back to this person at all, because we don't want to say no. But out of respect, just as your practice of your self-love and your boundaries, I just encourage you, when this feeling of discomfort comes up and you don't want to contact that person to say no to them, it kind of goes back to what I said in my live stream about communication. When it comes to these situations, just expect that you're going to feel discomfort. But that feeling of discomfort is going to become less and less and less. And also, you are not, when you immediately say no, immediately after you have found out whether you want to say no or not, then you are just, again, you're building that self-trust and that confidence that you are capable of doing so, and that in the end of the day, it is not as bad as we make it out to be in our own minds. Because our brain is just so avoidant to that it always imagines pain with those sort of situations. But truthfully, that doesn't really have to be the case. And the more you practice it, the easier it is getting. So the questions that I wrote down, if you're unsure, ask yourself, do I want to do this? Is this good for me? And then another question that I also brought up in my video about communication is, what is the most loving thing to do for everyone involved? And that is always such a good question to ask. What is the most loving thing for me in this situation? What is the most loving thing for the other people? For example, the bake sale example. For you, it was, or for Brené, it was the most loving thing that she said, no, actually, I can't put that on my plate tonight or today. And then another loving thing for them to say is there anything else I could do? Maybe like a smaller task, or next time for sure, if I can, I'll be more than happy to help. So that they know that this is not just a general no, but that you do want to chip in. And another thing that I wrote down is that when you feel exhausted and resentment a lot of the time, that is a sign that you have said yes way too many times to way too many people, and you really need to sit down, wind down, and think about how to prioritize what you really want to say yes to, what you really want to say no to. I think another point I briefly want to mention before this live stream ends is sometimes we feel the urge, like we tell ourselves, I need to do this or I have to do this. And this often happens, especially with our parents. Like mom asks you something or dad asks you something, even if you're an adult, a lot of us still feel the urge to always do as they ask us to do. But we are allowed to also say no to our parents, or we are allowed to say, look, this is how I see it now. I see it a little bit differently. I know you raised me like X, Y, and Z, and that was great, but I've come to my own conclusion, or today I don't want to do this. Here's the thing, and I found this really, really, really interesting. And I didn't know this until I did the research for this live stream. When we set loving boundaries, we actually create more more intimacy in our relationships. Obviously, unless you split ways because somebody always violates your boundary. But if you can find common ground and love for each other and a way to deal with things, you create more intimacy because you've been honest. Because think about it, when you always keep what bothers you to yourself, this is just a pile that is just piling and piling and piling inside. And in the end of the day, very, very often, it will lead to you splitting ways because of that pile. Because then you just build that resentment. Once you start building that resentment, there will be other things that annoy you about that person for sure. Because like attracts like. And if you have that resentment, there will be more people. You know, this person that you don't like, suddenly you don't like everything about them. I once received an email and I thought it was so interesting. The person said that that they were describing a person and all the things they didn't like. And then they said, okay, but now think about if your best friend did all of these things, or if your boyfriend did all of these things, would you actually dislike them as much? And you wouldn't, not with somebody who you have a great relationship with. Like somebody you have an amazing relationship with, they can mess up here and there. You forgive them because you love them. So just watch out if you if you keep a lot of resentment, because in the end of the day, you are the person hurting. the other person, if you never speak up, doesn't even know what's going on at all. I feel like there were a few more things. Let me quickly check. No, I said most of these things. Yeah, I wrote down most people don't set boundaries because they don't want to follow through. And then I wrote, we have to love ourselves enough to tell people in our lives the truth. That's so true. And our boundaries come from a place of love. When we have boundaries, intimacy is increased, which is what I just said. And then I also made a note on, the acceptance part, which is what I talked about earlier. And then I also wrote, many times we think that boundaries are limitations we set on other people, but when we do that, we put our energy into controlling the other person. Yeah, that is so true. Actually, I just went through a note. I said everything that I wanted to say in this live stream. I hope you enjoyed today's live stream. If you have a friend who is struggling to set boundaries, share this live stream with them. And next week, I'll see you at the same time, 7 p.m. UK time. I'm really looking forward to it. Haven't decided on the topic yet, but I will. There will be another live stream. And I always announce what topic on my Instagram on Monday mornings. And I'm sending you so much love from London, and see you in my next live stream. Bye.